to another conversation on democracy from the historic campus of Washington and Jefferson College. Our guest today is Dr. David Siegel, Professor of Educational Leadership at East Carolina University. David is on our campus today to speak at the 7th Annual Symposium on Democracy. David, welcome to W&J.
Very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Well, we appreciated your presentation this morning and would like to just get you to share a few thoughts on some of the highlights of what you shared with our students. It was clearly well received. You got some very good questions from the audience as well. And it struck me early in your talk that you described higher education, in your words, as something that was seen by founders of our country as an indispensable public square for the exchange of ideas.
Yeah.
Say a little more about our role in higher education as being a public square.
Yeah, I mean, I think at our best, colleges and universities provide the kind of public square for all kinds of ideas and disagreements over those ideas, and a public forum for discussion, debate, discourse, and it's a vital component of a liberal democracy, and it's vital that we protect and preserve the academic freedom of professors, of students, of citizens to have conversations and to share ideas in a spirit of open inquiry, that's not subject to, political overreach, restrictions, suppression. So many of the things that we're dealing with now as institutions of higher education that don't really have learning as the ultimate objective, but rather sort of directs us to do certain things or to express certain ideas that are politically expedient.
The founders of the country recognized the importance of education in sustaining a democratic society. They understood the importance of having places where we prepare people to engage in debate and free inquiry and freedom of thought.
Yep.
You said in your talk today that to say higher education is embattled is an understatement. Yeah. Why would an institution that's so fundamentally important as a pillar of our democratic society be embattled?
Yeah, well, and that sort of martial language is very common these days. I mean, it's hard to read the academic press and even the more popular media these days without seeing references to the assault on academic freedom or the culture wars, attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, the war on woke, the weaponization of history, the war on science. That imagery gets used quite a bit to describe, the conditions under which colleges and universities and just our culture in general are laboring these days.
It seems to me in my role as a college president that I see, to use the martial language, attacks on higher education coming from the right and the left.
I think so.
I think both political parties seem to have found that it's expedient to use higher education as a punching bag to gain points with certain facets of the electorate.
I think that's exactly right.
And with that has come a loss of public confidence in higher education.
Yes.
Maybe the loss of public confidence is why it seems like such an attractive target for politicians. But what do you think is behind that? How have we come to this point?
I think part of it has to do with a critique of the Academy's liberal monoculture. And this is not new, but this has certainly accelerated of late. The critique that higher education is dominated by liberal ideology or is inhospitable to or hostile toward conservative academics, professors, students. There are polls of conservative academics and students showing that they are self-censoring in their research, in their teaching, in their class discussions. There are a lot of questions about that. and we should interrogate some of those claims. But there's no doubt that there has been this this claim that higher education is dominated by the left. I think the best research we have shows that higher education is actually, professors happen to be much more moderate than is commonly portrayed in the rhetoric about colleges and universities. But I think even from the left, there's a critique that we are unable to have or unwilling to have many of the important conversations about issues that matter in American life. That we are doing some self-censoring. That we are not immune to our own sort of fundamentalisms, our own ideologies, our own proclivities that can have the effect of crowding out some oppositional conversations. And I think the critiques are coming from the right and the left, and as I said in the talk, it seems that we are displeasing almost everyone these days.
Well, and it does, and it also, in that situation, would be natural for us to adopt a defensive posture.
Yeah.
And not be open to the possibility that maybe we bear some responsibility for a loss of public confidence in our sector of higher education.
Yeah.
You think that kind of self-awareness and ability to be more reflective on what we do is necessary at this time?
I do. Yeah.
Or are the critics are they all wrong?
I think that that we ought to take those claims. We ought to take them seriously. We ought to put ourselves under the microscope, while recognizing that it is often politically potentially harmful to us to do that. So if we're being attacked as we are, for us to say, well, maybe there's some there's some legitimacy to these claims, and we ought to, as any good academic institution would do, we ought to be the public square, for opening those claims to inspection and to do it in a responsible and reasoned way. And I think we ought to do that, and I think we also ought to be clear-eyed about how that opens us up to further attack. And I would like to believe, and I think a lot of us would like to believe, that our sort of conversational partners, if you will, in these matters are acting in good faith, and that we might all, sort of work towards some kind of understanding. But I think a lot of us are a little cynical about that prospect and skeptical that our partners actually are operating in good faith, and that instead they'll look for some opportunity, to find something that can be used to attack us to an even greater extent.
The principle of academic freedom can be traced back at least to Oxford, when John Wycliffe was surrounded by the Oxford scholars and protected from censorship by the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so it's not anything new.
Right.
But on the other hand, it does seem to me that when people are encroaching on our freedom of thought and freedom of expression, freedom to teach, that's born of some kind of fear.
Yeah.
And that at our very best in higher education, we're places where we actually encourage people to encounter ideas that they find off-putting or even find threatening.
Yes.
In order to really engage those and reflect on them and put those up against some of the ideas of their own that might contrast with that.
Right.
So the idea that we want to shut out certain ideas from consideration limits our ability to learn. But these debates go back many, many, many centuries, and maybe it may always be with us, because I think when people are fearful of ideas, they want to shut the ideas out and have them not given the light of day at all. Right?
Exactly right. And I think one of the silver linings when we talk about trying to suppress those ideas out of fear or something else, is that just like knowledge wants to be free, those activities, those efforts to learn will go somewhere. The action will move. And I think we can expect that. History tells us that is what happens, in fact. There are certainly very visible displays of that kind of movement, but also many more invisible displays that we don't know about. But we can be certain that the impulse to be free is alive and well in some form or fashion. And so it always amuses me a little bit that these efforts to restrict, suppress, control seem to be undertaken with a kind of sincerity or earnestness that I think isn't warranted, because surely these folks must know that they will just sort of stimulate a counter effort to a countermeasure to take the action somewhere else.
But it may score political points.
It absolutely does.
Whether it accomplishes
That's exactly
what they
right.
claim they're trying to accomplish.
Which is one of the ways we know that we're not sort of in learning objective space so much as we are in political machination space and scoring political points and using us as colleges and universities, that is, using us as props in a power play in a lot of ways.
Well, we appreciate your generosity in sharing your insights and your time with us here at W&J today and spending this much time on our campus with our students.
It has been my sincere pleasure. I've loved being here and loved having this opportunity to engage with students and faculty and with you, and so appreciate the hospitality and generosity.
We've been talking with David Siegel, Professor of Educational Leadership at East Carolina University, who's with us today at Washington and Jefferson College for our 7th annual Symposium on Democracy.